The Return. Admiral Zolthrak of the Galactic Imperium stared at the sensor readings with all four of his crystalline eyes widened in disbelief. The vessels had appeared from nowhere, 7 obsidian warships that materialized just beyond the defense perimeter of Nexus Prime, the crown jewel of Imperium space and seat of the Eternal Council. "Impossible," he whispered, his secondary voice box vibrating with distress. "Run another diagnostic sweep. Nothing can penetrate our detection grid without warning." Lieutenant Commander Vexra nodded, her iridescent scales flashing anxiously under the command center's blue lights. "Diagnostic complete, Admiral. The readings are accurate. 7 vessels, unknown configuration, no warp signatures, no jump distortions. They simply appeared." The silence that followed was punctuated only by the soft hum of the command center systems. On the massive holographic display dominating the chamber center, the mysterious ships hung motionless, their design unlike anything in the Imperium database, sleek, aggressive, with no visible propulsion systems or energy signatures. "Have they responded to hails?" Zolthrak asked, his dorsal spines involuntarily flattening against his back, an ancestral response to potential danger. "No, Admiral. We've transmitted on all standard frequencies. They're receiving but not acknowledging." Just as Zolthrak was about to order defensive protocols, one of the junior officers, a young Krydian named Mezek, called out from his monitoring station. "Admiral, the vessels are changing configuration." On the display, the 7 ships were indeed transforming. What had been sleek, predatory shapes were now unfurling like deadly flowers, revealing weapons systems that pulsed with an ominous crimson energy. "Defensive protocols. Now." Zolthrak barked, but even as the words left his primary mouth, he knew they might be too late. Fleet Commander Thrax entered the command center, his massive frame casting long shadows across the strategy table. His 8 eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic projection. "Magnify the central ship's bow," he ordered suddenly, his voice unnaturally tight. The display shimmered and focused on a symbol etched into the obsidian material, a stylized representation of a blue-green planet with a single moon, surrounded by a circle of stars. Thrax went completely still, his armored exoskeleton rigid with shock. "By the void," he whispered. That's impossible." What's impossible?" demanded Zolthrak, panic threatening to overwhelm his disciplined mind. "That emblem," Thrax replied, his voice hollow with horror. "That's the insignia of the Earth Defense Force. Those are human ships." The command center erupted in confused murmurs. Zolthrak felt his 3 hearts skip several beats simultaneously. "Humans, but they've been extinct for 3 millennia." "Apparently not," Thrax replied grimly as the first communication ping finally registered on their systems. "And they've come home." 3,000 years earlier, Supreme Commander Zarek Vox stood on the observation deck of the Imperium flagship Inevitable Dominance, watching with cold satisfaction as the blue-green planet burned below. His 4 arms were clasped behind his back, posture perfect as befitted the architect of the most significant military victory in the Imperium's 8,000-year history. "The human defense fleet has been completely neutralized," Supreme Commander reported Sub-Commander Lithex, her voice filled with awe. "Casualty reports indicate we lost only 19 vessels out of our armada of 500. And their orbital stations." Zarek Vox didn't look away from the spectacle below. The atmosphere of the planet called Earth was now churning with firestorms as the Imperium's plasma bombardment continued. "All 15 have been destroyed. The last one, I believe they called it Humanity's Cradle, tried to make a desperate jump to their outer system. We intercepted it before it could clear the gravity well." Zarek Vox allowed himself a small nod of approval. "And the planet's surface. We've targeted all major population centers as you ordered. Extinction level event achieved. The few remaining pockets will suffocate when the atmosphere becomes unbreathable in approximately 50 hours. Lithex paused, then added hesitantly, though there are reports of unusual energy readings just before we commenced the final attack. Several small vessels may have escaped our blockade. For the first time, Zarek Vox turned to face his subordinate, all four of his eyes narrowing. Escape to where? We've mapped their entire system. There's nowhere to hide. Unknown, Supreme Commander. The readings were anomalous. They didn't match any known propulsion method. Our analysts are still trying to interpret the data. Zarek Vox waved a dismissive limb. Irrelevant. If any survived, they're inconsequential. A handful of refugees with nowhere to go. The human threat is eliminated. He turned back to watch as another continent was engulfed in flames. Their resistance was unexpected. Who would have thought such a primitive species could destroy 5 of our capital ships? They were surprisingly resourceful, agreed Lithex. The Council was right to order their preemptive destruction. Below them, a massive explosion blossomed across what had once been the northern hemisphere of the planet. The Supreme Commander's diamond-hard scales reflected the orange glow as he allowed himself a rare moment of emotion. Pure, triumphant satisfaction. Add their homeworld coordinates to the Forbidden Zones registry, he commanded. No Imperium vessel is to approach this system again. Let their world become a tomb and their memory fade into dust. As you command, Supreme Commander. Neither of them noticed the small data packets that had been transmitted from Earth's surface in the final moments before its destruction. Messages that traveled along frequencies the Imperium sensors couldn't detect, carrying with them the combined knowledge of humanity. And one final promise. We will return. On the far side of the galaxy, those data packets reached their destination. A secret facility where 3 generation ships had already begun their long journey into the unknown, carrying with them the seeds of humanity's vengeance. 3,000 years. That's how long they would remember. That's how long they would prepare. That's how long the Imperium had to enjoy its victory before judgment would come due. Incoming transmission, announced Lieutenant Commander Vexra, her voice cracking with tension. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Admiral. Admiral Zalthrak straightened his posture, a gesture meant to project confidence he didn't feel. Put it through. The holographic display in the center of the command chamber flickered, and suddenly a figure appeared. Bipedal, with smooth skin lacking scales or exoskeleton, 2 eyes instead of multiple sets, small flat teeth rather than fangs. By all appearances, soft and vulnerable. Human. The being wore a dark uniform with silver accents and a series of symbols across the chest that must have denoted rank. Their face was framed by short hair the color of space itself. But what struck Zalthrak most were the eyes, cold and calculating, like a predator assessing prey. This is Fleet Admiral Morgan Sinclair of the Earth Reclamation Force. The voice was level, almost pleasant. No translator delay. They were speaking perfect Standard Galactic. I'm here to speak with whoever represents the leadership of the Galactic Imperium. Fleet Commander Thrax moved forward to stand beside Zalthrak. How is this possible? He whispered. The humans were exterminated. Their planet reduced to cinders. The human on screen smiled, a gesture that didn't reach those predatory eyes. I can hear you, Commander. Your subvocal range falls well within standard human hearing. The smile widened fractionally. And to answer your question, yes, you did try to exterminate us. You just didn't try hard enough. Zalthrak felt a chill run through his 3 hearts. I am Admiral Zalthrak of Nexus Prime, senior military representative of the Galactic Imperium in this sector. Your presence here is unexpected. I bet it is, Sinclair replied with a short, sharp laugh. 3,000 years is a long time to believe you've gotten away with genocide. Must be quite the shock to see us again. 3,000 years is also a long time to hold a grudge. Zalthrak countered, trying to regain his equilibrium. None alive today were part of what happened to your homeworld. Oh, that's where you're wrong, Admiral. Sinclair's expression hardened. Several members of your Eternal Council were junior officers during the Earth campaign. Your historical records are quite thorough, even if they're not publicly accessible. We've had time to do our homework. Thrax stepped forward. How did you survive? Where have you been hiding all this time? Not hiding. Evolving. Growing. Preparing. Sinclair gestured, and the view expanded to show more of the bridge around them. Other humans moved efficiently at various stations, their movements precise, their technology clearly advanced far beyond what the Imperium had faced 3 millennia ago. What do you want? Zalthrak asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Justice. Retribution. Pick your synonym. Sinclair leaned forward slightly. But I'm not unreasonable. I'm willing to negotiate terms. Terms. Zalthrak repeated. Yes. Surrender the individuals responsible for the decision to destroy Earth. Acknowledge your crimes against our species in the galactic record. And cede control of our ancestral system back to humanity. Sinclair's eyes glinted like polished obsidian. Do that, and we won't be forced to demonstrate exactly how much more advanced we've become during our exile. The command center fell silent. Even the ambient noises of the systems seemed muted. That's impossible. Fleet Commander Thrax rumbled. The Eternal Council would never agree. Your ships appeared from nowhere, interrupted Zalthrak, his tactical mind working furiously. Our sensors detected no approach. How? Sinclair's smile returned, and this time there was genuine amusement in it. We call it void folding. It's what happens when a desperate species spends 3,000 years focused on a single goal, finding a way back to deliver justice to those who tried to erase them from existence. The human paused, then added, You have 6 hours to consider our terms. After that, we begin our demonstration, starting with Nexus Prime. The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Vexra whispered, her scales pale with fear. Reinforcements are at least 12 hours away. Zalthrak turned to Fleet Commander Thrax. Get me a direct line to the Eternal Council. Now. And if they refuse the humans' terms? The commander asked. Zalthrak looked back at the holographic display of the 7 obsidian ships now surrounding Nexus Prime in a perfect sphere, a cage of death. Then we learn whether our ancestors should have been more thorough. Reckoning. 2 hours into the 6-hour ultimatum, a small shuttle departed from the lead human vessel, its destination Nexus Prime's primary diplomatic bay. Admiral Zalthrak had received his orders from the Eternal Council. Stall, gather information, and under no circumstances reveal weakness. This is lunacy, muttered Fleet Commander Thrax as they waited in the diplomatic reception chamber, allowing them onto the station. They could be carrying any number of biological weapons. They passed through 3 decontamination fields and 2 scanner arrays, Zalthrak replied, though he shared the commander's concern. Besides, if they wanted to destroy us, those ships of theirs could have done so the moment they arrived. The doors to the chamber hissed open. 4 humans entered, 3 flanking the central figure who could only be Fleet Admiral Sinclair in person. They were even more unnerving up close. Their movements too fluid, too precise. Their eyes constantly scanning, analyzing, categorizing. These were not the primitive humans from historical records. Admiral. Sinclair nodded to Zalthrak, then to Thrax. Commander, I appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. You didn't leave us much choice, Zalthrak responded. The Eternal Council has reviewed your demands and finds them problematic. I expected nothing less. Sinclair smiled that same cold smile from the transmission, which is why I brought something to help change their minds. They gestured, and one of the other humans, a tall individual with skin the color of burnished copper, stepped forward, holding what appeared to be a small metallic sphere. The copper-skinned human placed the sphere on the center of the conference table. It hummed to life, projecting a 3-dimensional stellar map of the galaxy. Before we begin, Sinclair said, I should introduce my colleagues. This is Commander Ravi Chen, our Chief Tactical Officer. The copper-skinned human nodded. To my left is Dr. Elena Novak, our Chief Scientist. A human with long dark hair and intense eyes inclined her head slightly. And Major James Thorne, Head of Special Operations. The last human, broad-shouldered with a facial scar that ran from eye to chin, remained utterly expressionless. Zolthrak noticed all four wore small devices at their temples, technology he couldn't identify. Neural interfaces, perhaps. Now, continued Sinclair, gesturing to the galactic map, let's discuss why your council should reconsider our terms. The map zoomed in on 13 specific points throughout the galaxy, each marked with a pulsing red indicator. What are those? Fleet Commander Thrax demanded. Those, Dr. Novak spoke for the first time, her voice carrying an accent Zolthrak couldn't place, are the locations of the 13 human colony clusters we've established over the past 3 millennia. Impossible, Zolthrak blurted. We would have detected them. The same way you detected our ships before they appeared around your station. Commander Chen asked, raising an eyebrow. We learned early in our exile that visibility meant vulnerability. The 3-generation ships that escaped Earth's destruction carried 50,000 humans, Sinclair explained. Today, our population exceeds 8 billion, spread across 47 worlds in these 13 star clusters. The map shifted again, highlighting bands of space connecting the clusters. These are our transit corridors, regions of space where we've mastered void folding to move instantly between our territories. You've never detected us because we exist, in essence, just slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. Major Thorne spoke next, his voice a gravelly rumble. 3,000 years gives you time to make improvements. He tapped the device at his temple. To your ships, to your weapons, to yourselves. Zolthrak felt his blood run cold. You're not entirely human anymore, are you? Genetically, we are human, Dr. Novak corrected. But we've learned to integrate technology with biology in ways your scientists haven't even conceptualized. The neural interfaces are just the beginning. We've spent 3,000 years remembering Earth, Sinclair said quietly. 3,000 years preserving what was lost while evolving into what was needed. Every child born learns about the homeworld. Every advance in technology was measured by one standard. Will this help us bring justice to those who destroyed everything we were? The map shifted once more, this time showing the locations of every major Imperium world, installation, and fleet, information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. We've been watching you for centuries, Commander Chen explained. Your security protocols are impressive, but designed to stop threats you understand. Zolthrak exchanged glances with Fleet Commander Thrax. This was worse than they had imagined. What exactly are you saying? The commander asked. I'm saying, Sinclair replied, leaning forward, hands flat on the table, that this isn't a negotiation. It's a courtesy. Either the Eternal Council meets our demands, or beginning in. They checked a device on their wrist. 3 hours and 47 minutes, we start dismantling the Imperium. One installation at a time. One fleet at a time. One world at a time. You would commit the same crime you accuse us of? Zolthrak asked, genuinely horrified. No, Sinclair's voice hardened. We're giving you a choice. Your ancestors gave us none. The Imperium's response came 15 minutes before the deadline expired. A battle fleet of 76 warships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus sector. No warning, no further attempts at diplomacy. Just the cold calculation of a regime that had ruled through fear for 8,000 years. Well, that answers that question, Fleet Admiral Sinclair remarked dryly, as alarms blared throughout the human flagship. The retribution. The Council chose war. Imperium fleet composition. 14 dreadnoughts, 22 cruisers, and 40 frigates. Standard assault formation. Commander Chen's fingers danced over his tactical display. Their weapons are hot, and shields at maximum. Were you expecting anything different? Major Thorne asked, his scared face illuminated by the red battle lights. Honestly? No, Sinclair's voice was calm, almost conversational. But I would have respected them more if they'd tried diplomacy a bit longer. High above Nexus Prime, the Imperium fleet accelerated toward the 7 human vessels, weapons charging. The station itself had activated its defense grid, a formidable array of particle cannons and shield generators. From the station command center, Admiral Xalthrak watched with a mixture of dread and resignation. So this is how it ends. The Eternal Council has made its decision. Fleet Commander Thrax said grimly. Whatever happens next is on their heads. The first salvos from the Imperium fleet lanced across space, dazzling beams of energy that should have vaporized the smaller human vessels. Instead, the beams simply vanished meters before reaching the obsidian hulls. What in the void? Lieutenant Commander Vexra gasped. And on the bridge of the Retribution, Dr. Novik monitored her systems with a small smile. Phase shift defenses functioning perfectly. Their weapons are passing through our folded space envelope. Remind me to thank the R&D team when we get home, Sinclair quipped, then nodded to Commander Chen. Ravi, show them what 3,000 years of technological evolution looks like. With pleasure, Admiral. Commander Chen's fingers moved rapidly across his console, the neural interface at his temple glowing blue. Activating void lances, justice, spat Zorex. For a primitive world that threatened the stability of the galaxy, your species was developing faster than any in recorded history. Your warlike tendencies combined with your rapid technological advancement made you an existential threat to galactic peace. The Council did what was necessary. Necessary. Sinclair's voice remained calm, but their eyes blazed. You exterminated 10 billion sentient beings because you were afraid of competition. You murdered children and poets and farmers and doctors because your grip on power might someday be challenged. Zorex waved a dismissive hand. What is done is done. What do you want now? Territory. Resources. Name your price, and the Imperium will consider it, provided you cease your aggression. Sinclair exchanged glances with their colleagues, then nodded to Dr. Novik, who stepped forward and placed a small device on the floor in the center of the chamber. It activated with a soft hum, projecting a holographic display that filled the entire room. What you're seeing, the scientist explained, is a real-time display of every human colony world, installation, and fleet. As you can see, we've established ourselves throughout the galaxy, hidden from your sensors by our phase shift technology. Impossible, whispered one of the younger counselors, their scales paling. There are hundreds of ships, dozens of worlds. And this, continued Dr. Novik, manipulating the display, is the current position of our voidfold projectors. Red points of light appeared throughout the galaxy, thousands of them, including several dozen surrounding the Imperium throne world itself. Each projector, Commander Chen explained, can generate a void lance capable of molecular disassembly at a range of up to 1 light-year. We've had them in position for over a century. The council chamber went deathly silent as the implications sank in. They could destroy every major Imperium world simultaneously if they chose to. What do you want? Zorex finally asked, his voice barely audible, the arrogance gone. Fleet Admiral Sinclair stepped forward. I want you to understand something, Counselor. We could have done to you exactly what you did to us. We had the means, the opportunity, and some would say, the justification. But we chose not to. Because that would make us no better than you. 3,000 years is a long time, long enough to evolve beyond the need for genocide. Sinclair paused, letting the words sink in. We don't want to destroy the Imperium. We want to transform it. Major Thorne stepped forward, activating a data tablet. These are our terms. They're non-negotiable. The current Eternal Council will be dissolved. A new galactic assembly will be formed, with representatives from all sentient species, including humanity. The assembly will govern by consensus, not decree. The truth of what happened to Earth will be taught in every school throughout the galaxy, not as propaganda, but as a warning of what happens when power is concentrated in the hands of the few. The Earth system will be returned to humanity, and we will begin the process of terraforming our homeworld back to habitability, a process your scientists will assist with. And finally, Sinclair's voice hardened. The 7 of you, who gave the order for Earth's destruction, will stand trial for crimes against sentience. Your fate will be decided not by us, but by a jury of representatives from all galactic species. Zorex's scales darkened with rage. You demand not justice but revolution. The Imperium has maintained peace for 8,000 years. Without our guidance, the galaxy would descend into chaos and war. Perhaps, Sinclair conceded, or perhaps the galaxy has been in stasis, its potential stunted by your fear of change and progress. They gestured around the ancient chamber. Look at your technology, Counselor. In 3,000 years, what have you truly created that's new? You've refined, you've optimized, but you haven't innovated. You've been too afraid of the unknown. We spent our exile doing what humanity has always done best, adapting, inventing, pushing boundaries. We didn't just survive, we thrived. And now we're offering to share that knowledge and progress with all species, not just humans, not just the ruling races of the Imperium, but everyone. Your choice is simple: evolution or extinction. The 7 counselors conferred briefly, their voices hushed. Finally, Zorex spoke, his voice heavy with defeat. We accept your terms. 1 year later, Fleet Admiral Morgan Sinclair stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, looking down at the blue-green planet that was slowly coming back to life. Terra, Earth, was still scared from the devastation inflicted upon it 3 millennia ago, but the terraforming process was progressing faster than expected. Dr. Novik joined them at the viewport, data tablet in hand. The atmospheric composition is approaching pre-destruction levels, she reported. The first pioneer teams can begin surface habitation within 6 months. Sinclair nodded, a sense of peace washing over them that had been absent for most of their life. And the assembly. The transition is proceeding smoothly, Commander Chen replied, stepping onto the deck. The former Imperium worlds are adapting to the new governance structure better than we anticipated. There have been some protests, of course, but overall, the response has been positive. And the technology sharing initiative. Chen smiled. That's been the most successful part. It turns out that when you remove the artificial restrictions on scientific collaboration, amazing things happen. The Cridians have already integrated our phase shift technology with their bioengineering techniques. The results are impressive. And the 7? Sinclair asked, referring to the former counselors. Major Thorne, who had been silently standing in the corner, spoke up. The trial concluded yesterday. They were found guilty, as expected, but the sentence surprised everyone. Sinclair raised an eyebrow. Oh, life service. They'll spend the remainder of their extended lives helping to terraform Earth and the other worlds damaged during Imperium expansion. The jury felt it was more fitting than execution, making them build rather than destroy. Sinclair turned back to the viewport, watching as clouds swirled across the healing surface of humanity's ancestral home. 3,000 years, they murmured. Was it worth the wait? Dr. Novik placed a hand on their shoulder. Look around you, Morgan. We didn't just reclaim our past. We've secured a future, not just for humanity, but for all sentient life in the galaxy. I'd say that's worth waiting for. As the first rays of Earth's sun crested the horizon, illuminating the New Horizon in golden light, Sinclair thought of the generations that had lived and died in exile, keeping the memory of Earth alive, passing down the promise from parent to child. We will return. And they had. Not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as the architects of a new era. Humanity had not just survived, it had transcended. And in doing so, it had lifted the entire galaxy with it. The long exile was over. The healing had begun.